Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Windows on the World. Just finished our radio show, which is 9:30 p.m. I'm going to keep those going for a while, and they are quite popular. I think the live streams, though, are a really good idea, and I've just got a bit of interference here. That's better. Got rid of it. I could hit. I'm just trying to get rid of that. That's okay. Yes. All right, then. Yes, we are now live. Sorry about that. I had a couple of windows open. This is Windows on the World, and we go out at 9:30 p.m. live every Sunday at windowsontheworld.net. We have a chat box there, and we have our full archive at windowsontheworld.net. I also do live streams at the moment on YouTube. We are looking for other platforms. We did one last week, and we are going to have the same guests on again because we've got some follow-up to last week's show. But this week saw the World Economic Forum and Davos taking place. So Davos, the online version of Davos, is actually going ahead from tonight. And it was full of the usual useful idiots and technocrats and people who seem to have had half their brains removed. There's a slight logical part of the brain that's remained intact, but it doesn't see anything outside of the words diverse, inclusive, sustainable and resilient. We're talking here, of course, about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. He says we have a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reset the world after the pandemic, which of course is a driving factor for what we're in at the moment, along of course with climate change, which is of course not going away. Climate change is here to stay because it's a driver of, guess what? Global governance. Yes, the new financial system, the biosecurity health system, the new fourth industrial revolution, they're calling it. And it means that basically, if you are a small business, you will not exist. And it does appear that they've been trying to destroy small businesses for nearly a year now. So is it a conspiracy theory? No, it's not. It's actually part of the Global Governance Action Plan and the global governance structure. I've just been going through some of that in the radio show before this, which is really about the end of fact. That's what we're seeing, the end of fact. Turn on a television, pick up a newspaper. Are there any facts in it? No. There is an agenda. An agenda? Is that a conspiracy theory? No, it just means that everything outside it is demonized. There's no debate. There can be no debate because everything now is for the common good. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. It's that simple. We've seen the world's weirdest inauguration of a president. We are hearing all sorts of stuff which relates to the vaccine that's not a vaccine, that doesn't protect you from anything, and will also not stop you from catching what they tell you it's going to stop you catching. So the whole thing is upside down, and I think most people out there know that. We're going to get onto some interesting stuff tonight with Jerry Marzinsky and Martin Houston. I'm feeling a little bit wiped out today, so I'm going to let them take over, and we're going to have a good chat. So I'm going to add Martin and Jerry. Martin and Jerry, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hope you're feeling better, Mark.
I don't look too bad now, actually, in this light. But yeah, I'm a bit wiped out after getting a bit of food poisoning. But that was my own fault for going out. I was selfish. I went out and had something to eat.
Can't do that.
I put people's lives at risk, and I was punished.
Well, you lowly criminal, you.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't have done it. It's not for the common good. No. And I should be listening to people like Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum. We have a small window of opportunity to get this right. And that means destroying all self-employment, all inalienable rights, a global technocratic health biosecurity system, and basically a travel ban from now until forever. That's what they want at Davos. But it doesn't seem to affect them very much. It's interesting that these technocrats all sort of hang around in Switzerland, and really they are so removed from the reality that they're trying to enforce. to me, that's the scary bit. What do you think about all this to start with, Jerry?
Well, it's getting wilder every day.
Yeah.
Over here, the nation is in the grip of a dark fist, and it happened so suddenly. Trump attempted to wake people up to what was going on, and they just did everything they could to beat him down even before he got in there. They didn't like him talking. They didn't like him exposing, but he's exposed them better than any other president. And it's amazing he survived. They shot JFK for much less, much less. And
and it's all been forgotten in a week. That's the weird thing, isn't it? It's all been kind of forgotten as far as the media are concerned in a week. But to me, Jerry, I'm just going to pose this as a sort of question, really. That the way I see it is that it wasn't particularly Trump. It was what people thought he stood for, because there's only two sides now. What they've done is they've created two sides. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. You're with the far right. You're with the people who can think for themselves, basically. And that's what it is. There's those what think and those what don't. And that's the dividing line. And if you don't think, then you can go along with the useful idiots and join the Davos crowd and basically see all of your inalienable rights taken away. And then there's the selfish people like us who want to keep our rights.
Well, look what they've done with the mainstream media. There is no free speech over here anymore. There is no true news. The mainstream media is completely controlled by them. The Communist News Network, CNN, ABC, NBC, even public broadcasting is completely controlled by them. You can't turn on that television and have all these warped messages being driven into your head. So, and the average, a lot of people here, especially lower income, they dead tired. They come home from work, they're exhausted, got to take care of the kids, make dinner, do whatever chores. They turn on the TV, get brainwashed, go to bed, and get a brainwashing the next day. It's like at least half the population. And all the mainstream, the underground news has been knocked out. YouTube has just destroyed site after site after site after site. Now they're going after BitChute. Here they may be going after some of these others. I mean, they took down Parler. They just completely destroyed Parler. So this darkness that has descended on the planet, I mean, it's always been here, but people have just woken up to it. I mean, it was like hidden, and then boom, it's like all of a sudden our government is taken over. There is no doubt that Joe Biden has been paid multiple millions upon millions, maybe billions, by the communist Chinese. None. Hunter Biden was a drug addict, kicked out of the Navy. He had no skills. He had no expertise in petrochemicals. He had no business being over there at all, other than collecting money for the big man.
Jerry, what do you think of this salute the Marines thing, that Joe Biden has a handler and he can't even follow the instructions from his handler? It's just crazy, isn't it?
Well, I believe it. I mean, they he's a complete puppet. Matter of fact, I saw a video earlier today where it was a hot mic, and he was signing this pile of revocations to all Trump's executive orders, and you could hear him say, "I don't even know what I'm signing," and he's just signing one after the other. So, one of the bills he's pushing through, he's trying to get at the guns big time. They want a 40% tax on ammunition, 40% tax on any gun you buy. You can't find primers over here. You can't find ammunition over here, but the companies are saying they're producing it faster than they ever have before, but it's not reaching the shelves. The Department of Homeland Security has bought 2 billion rounds of 9mm ammunition. That is not target ammunition. That's killing ammunition. What is the Department of what are they going to do with that? That's people killing ammo. It reminds me of that train where they were attacking Texas, that operation, whatever it was. Man, you can see them moving over here. I mean, it's just, they've got a total grip on the judicial system. Total, all the way from the city to the county to the state, all the way up to the federal court. And Judge Roberts, who's a a prime passenger on the Lolita Express and is blackmailed to the max. So Trump exhausted every possible legal avenue, and they would not listen to any of it. They would not take the case. They passed it from case to court to court to court until it finally arrived at the Supreme Court. And Judge Thomas, who's blackmailed, started screaming bloody murder. They said you could hear his voice all the way down the hall, where those meetings are usually pretty sedate. So the court system is gone. If the military
but I think that's a big part of the sustainable development agenda, which was really all about mentoring everyone into this system. That's the whole idea of this system of communitarianism, is it's inclusive. In other words, you can't be outside it, and it's very much an infiltration process. So it doesn't matter what organization it is, whether it's to do with the judiciary or any other kind of department or anything to do with governance. Basically anything to do with governance has been taken over, and that is done through mentoring people into sustainable development, which is a depopulation program. So they all openly talk the same language, and if you don't talk their language, then you're not in the club. And it's as simple as that. That's what these people at the World Economic Forum are talking about. And someone just put in the chat that Klaus Schwab's a front puppet. He's not a front puppet. He's been the leader of the World Economic Forum since 1971. But when you look at the associations that these organizations have, they are global. That's why they call them globalists. So first of all, the people who were running this stuff were nationalists. That didn't work. Then they became internationalists, and now they're globalists, because in the new system, countries don't matter. It's an economic system which is not based on anything to do with what countries used to call traditional growth. And of course, limits to growth was what was meant to be the driving force behind the World Economic Forum from the Club of Rome. Limits to growth, we're using far too much stuff, there's too many people. And this is reiterated by all of the useful idiots on the planet, because they will all advocate population reduction. Therefore, they're part of sustainable development. Therefore, they are enforcing the new global health security system. It's quite simple, really, and it has to be talked about in those terms. And really, it's about people taking back the narrative, if they can do that, because the narrative that comes out of the mainstream now, what they call the mainstream, the major news, is so repetitive, dull, and untrue that the only thing it's got going for it is its horrible, creepy gaslighting. That's the only thing that they have which actually keeps people hypnotized into it, is this reversal of fact. So that's why it's post-truth, and that's why I've called this show Post-Truth Era, because that's what we're in. We are fully in the post-truth era now. So in a way, some of those things don't have to be addressed anymore. It goes without saying. There's no point in trying to prove a fact anymore, because facts don't mean anything. They've got to the point where facts don't mean anything, which is, of course, the idea of this in the first place. It's to blur the mind, the wilderness of the mind, the borderless Pangea. The world will become borderless. The mind will become borderless, and people will not have any boundaries. Now, this is the way they thought of it. But when a technocrat says that, they're missing very large parts of a jigsaw puzzle that I don't think they even understand. Over to you, Martin. What do you think?
Yeah, this is so disturbing that they just want to get people to obey rules which are arbitrary and rules which make no logical sense. Like one of the things about mask wearing is the police should be coming down like a ton of bricks when anyone attempts to drive a vehicle with a mask on, because it restricts your oxygen intake. It should be considered as bad as drunk driving. And in the cold weather, you've got the extra problem that it fogs your glasses up. So it's
I've seen that.
Driving with masks on. Why aren't the police giving them tickets?
Well, it's for the common good because they're enforcing the new system for the police. You know, I mean, it's not rocket science, Martin.
All the police have a restricted oxygen intake, so they can't think as clearly as they should. You'd have thought detectives would have detected the fact that this was a con by now, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't know, because over the past 10 years, I've never met a policeman who could actually think clearly. Maybe there is one. I don't know. I haven't met one. If there's any listening, let me know, you know. But I've never met one who could think clearly. So I suppose this is just an acceleration of the global action plan. Make them think even less clearly.
Yes.
Let's bring it on now to your situation, Martin. And you were a bit provocative the other week. You went into a local branch of Tesco's with a mask on, with one of those controversial V-type masks on. You know, and
for people that weren't watching last week, basically what happened to me as I was for a while now. I've been going around because we have to wear masks in this circuit breaker lockdown we've been forced into since the start of January. I thought, well, if you have to wear a mask, why not making advertising space to wake people up? Because they're going to notice your face or what's there instead of your face. Because people for ages have worn T-shirts with whatever message they want to put out on. So if we're having to wear masks, I thought, why not have a mask with a message? So I put COVID is a con on my trusty old anonymous mask, and been using it for a couple of weeks now without any issues. And then last Saturday in Tesco's, I was just minding my own business, doing my shopping, and the manager took exception to it. He said it grossly offended him that I dared say that COVID was a con. So So this is the situation where we're Tesco is now, when asked for a comment by Anna Breeze, they said I was causing a nuisance in the shop and being abusive to customers, which is slander, obviously.
Yeah, well, this is another thing I wanted to bring up, Martin, which is quite interesting about your case, because what tends to happen is the people who get hysterical about nonsense always lie about it as well. I mean, I don't know a public official that I've come across in the past 10 years that hasn't out and out lied, gaslighted, and diverted off the subject. It's usually one of those three. So this is the problem, that they will do that, and they're trained to do it. So there's no integrity anymore.
Oh, no.
I mean, what happened to you is it's just stupid, really. The fella, as I said last week, I think, was really, he just should have said that there's people in the shop who might be scared because you're wearing a mask on. It might look you're trying to rob the place. You know, that would be a sensible kind of thing to say if you're going to have to say anything.
What he actually said, he actually made it clear, which I can actually capture on the video, was that it was the COVID is a con he objected to, not the mask.
Yeah, he was a doctor, wasn't
he? He made it clear that that's what he didn't like. The fact I was questioning the official government narrative that they force people to lock down again and force people to wear masks in shops.
Oh yeah, because it's all your fault because you're being selfish as well, isn't it?
Oh yes.
Yeah. And
so in order to consider the sensibilities of people, I thought of this idea, and just a nice face shield like they wear, that the staff wear in shops themselves, and something totally non-provocative. Do you want to know the truth about COVID-19? And just some links for people to go and look at. So not provocative at all. And so I wore this a couple of times in shops, and then in my local supermarket, the duty manager there disagreed even with this on the basis that he had a friend who died with COVID.
That's always the appeal to emotion, isn't it? So you're killing people and you think that's all right. By going out and acting like this, you're killing people. And I know someone personally who died of this, so it's now personal to me. It's really personal to me now. Yeah. What a dreary way to carry on.
98% survival rate.
Yeah. But but at least I got to pay for my shopping that time rather than being thrown out without it. But he threatened. He said, if you come back in this shop again with a mask, you're barred. So really, really aggressive, really complete lack of any sense whatsoever. And but I was just walking the dogs today, and I wasn't planning to go shopping. I just thought I might as well drop in for some milk and some bread and whatever. And I had a scarf. I didn't have my mask with me, but before I could even get into the shop, the person at the door just said, "You're barred. You can't come in." So this manager must have told all the staff in the shop, because this has been several days since this incident happened. So all the staff around the door were told to look out for me and to tell me I'm barred. So he dragged the entire shop staff into his little vendetta.
Hey, Martin, get about 25 or 30 guys together. Give them all one of those masks, slip them under their shirt, and slip them all into the supermarket. And then in the middle of it, have them all put them on together. And you'll probably be accused of having a riot, right?
They used to call that flash mobbing, didn't they? And it was kind of acceptable. I don't think it'd be acceptable anymore. It'd be hate-filled now, wouldn't it? I'm sure it'd be far right. If a load of people turned up and did that, it'd be very far right, I think.
Well, you'd have to be get a flash to get out of there once you did it.
Yeah.
Get out that door.
It's interesting. Yeah, because I suggested a while ago that maybe people should all have a maskless shopping hour and all turn up at once. And then in the papers, they've suddenly started saying, and hordes of maskless people have been turning up, spreading hate by not wearing masks.
Propaganda.
Yeah, but this is the communitarian press, and I think it's much worse in the UK because it's such a smaller place, and all of the local newspapers are absolutely communitarian. You don't hear any voices outside that whatsoever. There's no local newspapers in the real sense anymore. They are all staffed by these cliche spouting useful idiots who aren't journalists. So a journalist is someone who goes out to source a story and then back it up with some facts. Well, when was the last time you saw any of that in the live group?
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I've got with me, we tried to do it via video, but the bandwidth wasn't enough. The Gremlins were acting up again, but I've got by phone with me Courtney Adam Lawrence, the author of The COVID Con Awake. This is his book from here on the Isle of Man. And he is assisting me with this incident with Tesco, trying to get them to back down on their assertions. Let's try and shame them into some sanity over this.
Okay, well, if you want to bring in Courtney, I'll jump out of this and I'll come back in with some questions.
Right, Courtney.
Hello, yeah, good to connect with you, Mark, and just to give a bit of background. Martin filmed my book launch on the Isle of Man in December, and when I saw how he was treated, which is pretty appalling for an individual who has diabetes, and they said, well, leave your shopping here, it just seemed excessive and draconian and overused words just because he wanted some free speech and a debate. It doesn't seem allowed, and suddenly Tesco's are the arbiter of free speech. So I went along on Friday to talk to the manager, Neil McConnell, perfectly nice individual. He came to see me. I then offered him my book, The COVID Con. I think anyone could work out what it might contain, but he wouldn't accept it as a free gift. And literally when I went to my phone, in truth and honour, to just film the exchange, he's turning down information, but he's turning away customers and deciding what they can't wear, perhaps, or have on them. It's just madness. And so he literally ran away. So I did call out after him. I then went outside and did a video nicely with the Tesco logo for maximum promotion. They like to market these things. They're part of the Build Back Better scam. So that whole process, we then said, this is what's gone on. And my chief contention is very simple. If there is no virus and there is no test and there is no contagion, then you say, what is this all about really, the masks and the vaccines, which aren't a vaccine? But if there is no virus and you look at all the Cox postulates, Rivers postulates, you look at the work of Andy Kaufman and see whether these Chinese and other papers actually isolated something you could remotely call a virus, and it would cause dis-ease in healthy tissue, and it had been proven that this was the cause of disease Well, it hasn't. That is the multi-trillion-dollar scam. Doesn't exist. SARS-CoV-1 didn't exist, and SARS-CoV-2 doesn't exist. So when you actually stay upstream and see the work of Amanda Vollmer and Andy Kaufman and quite a few others, Stefan Lanka, you'd see this is just nonsense, paranoia, and say, prove to me the virus. Because I think for governments now, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, and the UK, under freedom of information, has said we have not uniquely isolated and purified the virus. And I don't think the Isle of Man government has. They just use a multiple PCR unsafe test that the World Health Organization says is unsafe, and nobody really knows where and what this virus is. And you've had pawpaw fruit, Coca-Cola, papaya, and even, I kid you not, a goat. So that's it. They've all got SARS-CoV-2, multiplying up your own chromosome 8 DNA. So let's take this to new Nuremberg trials and hold these individuals doing business as, hold them to account. Health ministers everywhere, education ministers doing unlicensed medicine on their school premises, and people that are multiplying. And I saw a test today. CO2, when you have a mask on, multiplies it literally 20-fold. So suddenly people want to have this brain-harming gas coming into you with a mask on. It's of no sense. But my contention is very simple in my book. There is no virus. That's it. Once you stay upstream, the rest melts away.
Well, it's interesting that, yes, you are right. It's never been isolated. SARS-CoV-2, they don't have an isolate of it. We've got a letter from the National Virus Research Laboratory, and James McComiskey in Ireland wrote the book, the Biomedical Paradigm, and he goes into the contagion myth and fact and all the rest of it, what it's all about and what it isn't about. And that is a very interesting point, because the way that they attempt to isolate these things is basically they put it in with a load of other gunk, which means they can't isolate it. And it is one of the mainstays of the World Health Organization in the respect that they have instigated all of these so-called pandemics around these SARS viruses, SARS and MERS viruses. And they actually announced a pandemic, I think, in 2007, and they got it up to level 6. I don't know what level we're at now, but level 6 was the highest level of a pandemic. And of course, there was nothing like a pandemic. In this case, we have not got a pandemic in the true sense, because that would mean 12% of the population have to be infected, which is, of course, where the testing comes in and where, of course, the vaccination virus comes in, because obviously they need more and more people to be COVID positive. How do you get them to be COVID positive? With the test, which is now being even slated by the World Health Organization. Can you believe that? That they are saying that if they use 36 cycles, it's worthless. Well, they've been using 36 cycles for quite a long time. The advantage of this, of course, if you have a private test and you want to fly somewhere, you're pretty much guaranteed for it to be negative because you're paying for it. So it's all about the money. But what's interesting is that when you actually put this across to people like your manager of Tesco's and put some facts in front of them, they are rather resistant to it. In fact, they are intolerant to what you're saying. But I mean, if you hadn't have called your book The COVID Con and you'd called it COVID, an in-depth investigation, do you think he would have read it, or do you think he would have still thrown it back in your face?
I don't know. I think the very good lessons of all this has happened, and we've discussed how we've ended up here, but I think men have become cowards. I think that's one of the biggest single things, that the denaturing of food and men particularly is they don't want to take responsibility. Some of them are perpetual snowflakes, if I can say an ageist term, but it's true. And so the ability to take in difficult information and not to have a companion pet to go to your exams with is prevalent everywhere. But just the open debate, there is no virus. Or prove to me, let's ask a question under common law, because that's it. He who makes the claim bears the burden of proof. So let's just say, have you, Mr. Individual, Mrs. Individual in government, have you isolated, purified this SARS-CoV-2 uniquely? They put it in with vero cells, so animal cells, not in the natural host. They use antibiotics, which throws up exosomes. Look at the work of Andy Kaufman. But a book I managed to get, quite interestingly, because it seems to be book burnt, is The Contagion Myth by Thomas Cowan, an absolutely fabulous physician who's looked at the heart as not actually being a pump. He's looked at the actual previous so-called contagions, which also coincided with 1G radio waves or radar. So we have to look at the 5G map, which I've done, because this is a toxin in the body being excreted. It's changing our oxygen level with 5G, highly pulsed energy. And when you look at the map around the world, look at Lombardy with its pollution, but look at how the body cleanses. And when you put EMFs in there, you might have done it in 1918, you might have done it in 1956, you might have done it in 1968, and you might have had the Internet of Things city, a place called Wuhan. Pretty batty, that sort of idea, isn't it? It's actually the background radiation, EMS, the same as in the Diamond Princess. So let's all talk at length about the 5G background driving out oxygen in the body, whereas Wi-Fi tends to drive out water, 2.4 gigahertz. So a little bit of science, not too heavy, in between Ant and Dec and a few other people on telly. Let's actually say to these individuals, do you know what you're doing? And prove that this has been uniquely isolated. We don't need to get into the test and the contagion there for another day, but has the virus been isolated and purified? The answer is categorically no in any new Nuremberg trial.
Well, the problem is that we are in the post-truth era and facts don't matter. It's the propaganda that matters, and it has to be in the form of a soundbite. So that's why I think it's really important to make the points very, very simple and make them powerful, because this is mimetic warfare. So in a mimetic war, it's the best propaganda that wins, and the propaganda's coming out of every orifice of media, and it's not very good. So I think there is a chance to usurp that a bit, and that is a good ongoing project. And it's a project that even people I know have been engaging in locally, and it's quite fun and should be done a lot more, I think. So, yeah, I mean, the whole thing about these people who are stopping us going into supermarkets is that they've been given power that they shouldn't have. They are exercising authority that they don't have. And that's the problem. Yeah.
Well, they also control the narrative through the mainstream media. I mean, over here, it's just constant bombardment, one after the other. You don't know what the truth actually is. And it's spreading over here like a cancer. Matter of fact, one of the congressmen came out yesterday morning with this House bill that the Democrats put together for defense spending. Tacked onto it was, millions and millions of dollars for the communist Chinese, for Iran, and for Pakistan. This is taxpayer money that these morons want to give to these enemy countries, after they just passed the defense bill where they gave away multi-millions of dollars for stuff like transvestite research in South America. I mean, all these ridiculous things where it's clear that they're laundering the money, and it's coming back, and it's taxpayer money. And at the same time, where are they getting this? I mean, they're just printing it out of thin air. The world economy is about ready to collapse.
Yeah.
Well, the World Bank are feeding it all. They've just injected another 200 billion into the COVID action plan. They gave 160 billion to start with. So that's quite a lot already. But that's where it's all coming from. They need to keep people isolated until the system's rolled out, and until all the businesses have gone bankrupt, until everyone's dependent on the new global health security system, needs the global health passport, needs to have the universal basic income. And it is all based on this Chinese social credit system. But that's really what the World Economic Forum is about. And they talk about the World Economic Forum as though it's something to do with industry and business. It's not. It's the wiping out of industry and business, putting it in the hands of technocrats and a few corporations. So it's kind of interesting. But the thing about, you were saying about Pakistan, I was reading about the other day, and Imran Khan is enabling the rollout of this global health security system in Pakistan as well. And it's worldwide. And anyone who tries to stay outside it is demonized, or something will happen. And that was clearly said in the World Health Organization publication known as A Safer Future in 2007. They basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but threatened any country who did not get on board the new global health security system. And that means effectively, in their own words, that a pandemic could start in any country. And the people who control the narrative of that pandemic are the World Health Organization, the UN, and its organizations. So that's how you keep it in-house globally. And that is really what this meeting in Davos is all about, because they're not talking about the world as a business forum. They're talking about the world as a system which is going to be run on AI. And of course, that's not going to work everywhere and at all times. So that to me is the interesting thing, that especially with climate change, it's a castle built on sand. They had to kind of back off from that. So they brought in COVID. COVID's just another driver of the climate change agenda. And the thing is that you've got now a lot of people on board with it. So all of your middle class types, these trendies who think it's great to depopulate the earth as long as it's not in their backyard, and all the rest of it, and talking about climate change, these are the ones they needed to get on board, because they're the ones who have some wealth left, which is, of course, what they want to take from them, because they can't control the whole world while people have still got a few quid in their pockets. But you can't get this through to these numpties, basically, these people who don't want to think about it. They want to think that their society works in a certain way. They want to think that the common good means for the common good of them. Well, how naive is that? How stupid do you have to be to think that? You know?
Yeah, very stupid. But then thinking is not really in fashion at the moment, is it? It's obedience. This is what this is all about.
Exactly.
I found a really good thing for a study from 1953. I was going to pick that piece of paper up. Hold on.
Go on then.
Called the Biderman report.
Yes.
Biderman. Yes, you're familiar with that, Mark, are you?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Biderman, and he did the failings for suicide. Biderman's suicide. Is that the same Biderman? I think it is.
No. This is the chart of coercion. Basically, the study of what the Chinese and North Koreans did to American POWs. And
yes, I think it's the same Biderman. He was studying psychology. Yeah.
And basically, the way that lockdowns are structured is eerily identical to the way POWs were treated.
Yeah, I mean, the more you restrict people, the less they see outside. So that's the point. And it doesn't even matter if you can see through this completely. It's still going to impact, and you're still going to start getting paranoid. Oh, can I go there? Can I go here? And actually, newsflash, news just in, you can't go to a lot of places now. You have to think around it already. But the idea is that the people who watch a lot of TV will be most impacted. That's good. They can stay in. The people who are going to rebel against it will eventually be brought down by the psychological attacks and the environment that they're having to face. So that will force them to go underground. These are all basics, but what they don't take into consideration is people who act, as they would say, erratically or out of character. And acting erratically and out of character is always a driver of change.
Well, don't forget the fear factor, Mark. Remember, we talked about, had several interviews about how these negative entities feed on fear. And the fear being generated right now is like a 24-hour-a-day job by the mainstream media. You're going to
Yeah,
die of
that's
virus.
relentless, isn't it?
Yet now there's this strain that's 10 times worse than the others ever were, and you're all going to die. And
And then
you
the-
better watch it. Put that
How
mask
did we
up your
forget the
nose.
one they were trying to do last week. It was the British strain, then it was the Brazilian strain, then it's a Kent strain apparently. That's supposed to be, so they're blaming it just a county now for terrorizing the entire world.
Well, we got
Oh,
Fauci
yeah.
over here. We got Fauci over here that takes care of that. Yeah, him and Bill Gates, the bosom buddies there.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I think once you see the way this is structured, it's quite obvious. It's just that people don't have access to the way it's structured if they're watching the television, because none of the kind of structural way that this is imposed is talked about. So they haven't got any reference to it. But all you have to do is do a bit of research. I mean, it's quite interesting that the COVID action plan has sort of given a few people a clip round the ear that I knew from years ago, and they're now at entry level, but we're beyond entry level. We're nearly at the end game, so they're a bit late, really. You know, so
Well,
I think that equipping yourself with the tools of the system that you're working in is the most important thing, because if you don't understand how it's working, then how can you understand anything? You can't.
Or do anything about it.
Yeah. That's why it's post-truth, the post-truth era.
Well, that's why
think
they're
this-
stomping the guys like you into the ground. You know, you should see all the YouTube channels they've shut down over here.
Oh, yeah.
Virtually anybody who speaks against them, they're deplatformed or warned or given strikes. I've got a YouTube strike. They're obliterating people's means of talking to one another other than the telephone. If you say anything they don't like, they shut you down. And they completely decimated Parler. It's incredible. The power.
Yes, it's
of the media.
interesting. Yeah, but that's always happened, Jerry. I've got a friend who's an investigative journalist, and he was quite a well-known journalist and wrote about all sorts of things, including the economy. And as soon as he started talking about 9/11, bang, disappeared. It's interesting phenomenon, actually, that you can just disappear overnight. So when people disappear overnight, always look where they've gone, you know.
Well, they sure got rid of that debris pile quick enough. Sent it back to China, almost overnight. They got rid of that debris pile before anybody could investigate. They found tons of thermite melted steel in the basement, just pooled.
Yeah.
So that wasn't caused by jet fuel.
No, that just helped it sort of on the way, but it was I think
the post-truth thing, wasn't it? The 9/11 thing that people expected to just swallow the official narrative.
Well, and you could see
well,
the
yeah, I mean,
explosions.
that was a good test. It was a good test that would the public believe what they saw on a television as the reason why the buildings came down, and a lot of them did. Most of them did. But when you actually present the facts, they go, actually, no, that couldn't happen. But because people are television trained, they just watched it. But yeah, once you look into it more and more, it was a complex operation, including nuclear weapons. This is what I've had some very interesting and in-depth papers sent to me by scientists who have concluded that it was definitely a nuclear situation, but because of the culprits, no one can mention it. So I think once you look into that event, then it does lead one way and it all makes sense. 9/11 was just a driver of global change. Climate change, driver of global change. COVID-19,
a good reason to start a war. It was a good reason to start a war. Also, they wanted a war.
Yeah, driver of change. Yeah. Regime change in that case. Regime change.
Yeah, there were, I think, 1,000 engineers signed a petition saying that building was it was a demolition job. It doesn't just go down like that, straight down. And Building 5, that was out there isolated. There was nothing. Nothing could cause that except an explosion. They swept it all under the rug. You could even see the explosions going off the thermite bombs on some of the videos where they were hitting level after level. And that collapse was at the same speed as a cannonball that was thrown off a building. It just fell. A building just pancakes. There was no pancake.
No, I think that's a good inciting incident for the new American century. That was it really. And that was the turning point. After that, they've kind of gone on pretty much full steam. But I think COVID is a much bigger operation, and it's a much simpler operation. 9/11 was a complex operation, and it was done in sight of the public. COVID is something you can't see, and as we've already discussed, has not been isolated. It's a series of symptoms which fit an already existing name.
Yeah, it's flu. Yeah, the fact that we've got a new wave of COVID is because it's winter flu season.
Yeah, the flu over here has completely disappeared.
Poorly in hospital, like flu has been the contributing factor to people that are near death anyway, because they're old and they have serious health problems and they would have died soon of something. They tend to die as flu is one of the things they die from. This has happened for millennia.
Yeah, the flu has turned into COVID.
To take into consideration, I think, is if you're ill, don't go to hospital. That's not legal advice, or that's not advice at all. Actually, it's not advice. But if anything happened to me, unless there was bits falling off, I wouldn't go to hospital, and even then they'd have to drag me in.
Well, over here they were being paid $3,000 a patient that had COVID. Yeah. Now, recently they jacked it up to $50,000, and you have nurses coming out of the emergency room crying, saying they're killing people. They're killing people. No wonder. Yeah, everything is being diagnosed as COVID.
It's a good little earner, isn't it?
$50,000. They're
I think you can see that happening in the hospitals here. I mean, there's people who go into these COVID wards and they won't let them out, because once you're in there, they won't let you out, and that is something I think is well worth considering.
Don't take the test.
Well, this is another interesting point here, Jerry, is that those who didn't take the test in one hospital trust area that I know of, those who refused the test, all got put down as COVID positive.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So there is post-truth. There's no truth to any of this. And the statistics are rubbish. Whenever you look at something and start digging, you always find it's actually a diversion, and it's not the truth at all. When you start looking for the real facts, you will find them. It'll take a while, but then you'll find that, nothing's really happening. And that is a huge problem, because once you start taking up that position with people who watch the television all the time, they would think you were a conspiracy theorist because they haven't heard anything like it in their lives,
or a lunatic. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, well, a lot of the sort of things that people are now beginning to accept after a year of COVID, they'd have thought back that a year ago from now that was just conspiracy theories, that they're going to collapse the world economy. You think, no, you're just a conspiracy theory, but it's happened.
Yeah, the CIA come up with that one.
Yeah. Well, of course, the whole point is you just have to look at the drivers of change. And there hasn't been a driver of change like this in living memory. I've never known anything like this.
Oh, yeah.
It's the biggest global coup of all. And the United States has just suffered a coup. So, Jerry, in summing up for tonight, tell us what you think is happening in the States from your point of view.
Well, like I said earlier, the legal system is shot. There is no legal recourse. They've infiltrated the legal system all the way from the city level up through the county level to the state level to the Supreme Court. So there was tons of evidence that this election was stolen. I mean, in many different ways, by the computers, the voting machines that were designed specifically to steal votes. They had a 10-year-old on a cell phone break into one via the internet. They said it wasn't connected to the internet, but the white hats went through the internet as they were stealing the votes. So there's tons of evidence that this vote was stolen from all different directions. Ballots printed in China and computer darkened in, shutting down the vote in the middle of the night. And these people bringing out tons of votes and running them through the machine, or running the same votes through the machine again. I mean, over and over again. There's tons of proof. They won't listen to any of it.
That was quite incredible. But Jerry, what's happened to Giuliani? Why isn't he shouting and screaming from the rooftops about it? Or is he?
Well, he's somewhat. He hasn't given up yet, but they threatened to disbar him. So they're threatening to take his license to practice law. The state of New York is. So they would be removing his means of support, and they did the same thing to the other lawyer, Sidney Powell. They were going after her license, and the voting machine company has put in $1 billion lawsuit against her, which is groundless. So the last time I saw Sidney Powell, she looked like she'd been beat up pretty bad, and Giuliani is like low energy. The perplexing thing is Trump looks bright and bushy-tailed. It's like none of this has bothered him. He's still speaking out. He attempted to hold a meeting with some of the staff from the Democrats, and half of them didn't come. So he was trying to resolve the nuclear missile launch or the intercontinental missile launch from North Korea. So the system is just infiltrated all the way down, and they're getting people to enforce their decrees. They're stupid, idiotic decrees. The suicide rate is up. The health rate is up. These masks are crazy. But I don't see the kind of uprising over here yet that like we're seeing in Denmark. There are states that are doing investigations separately. But what they've already saw them do was break into those machines and change the chips, so there is no evidence. And Trump should have seized those machines immediately, and he didn't do it. So they were in there. I'm sure they changed the chips. It doesn't take very long to do that. So,
Well, there was plenty of evidence available online anyway for anyone who wanted to look at it, and they could see what happened when the observers were kicked out. And of course, the spike in the votes in the middle of the night. I mean, it's very, very obvious. You don't need to even research it that much. All the evidence was there. But of course, the public are immune to that because, as I said, we're in the post-truth world. But yeah, to sum up, really, a lot of these people who are pushing hopium and all the rest of it, all these idiots who are going on about the cabal's going to be overthrown, all the light workers are going to come in. I mean, these will carry on with their rubbish and keep it going and keep it going and keep it going. Someone just put into chat, what about the solutions? Well, we actually do come up with them on this show. If you go back into our archive, you'll know that the solutions have been brought up, and it is all about what you do locally. And other people are starting to copy that idea now. So I'm glad to hear it, because that's really all you can do, is take back the narrative locally, put your own people in. I've talked about this a lot. If you've got change agents, you have to usurp them, but also it's a way of making them know that you are onto them, which they're doing in America. North Idaho Exposed on YouTube. Take a look at them. Casey Whalen, Ammon Bundy. These people are actually holding their local officials accountable. Your local officials are your global officials. But I think that other things can be done outside it. We don't talk about it on these live streams, especially the stuff that's going to be done locally, because you never tell anybody what you're going to do until you've done it. So really, amongst the people that I know, the people that I talk to on a regular basis, there's some very interesting stuff being done, but we don't associate with the people who just talk. There's no point, because if you are just talking, then you are not fulfilling any responsibility with your information that you've got. So we tend to stay away from that. But there are lots of idiots on the internet who put this stuff out, and they get people drawn in, and they get hundreds of thousands of views. Then what's funny about it is that when people find out that it's all a load of rubbish, a couple of years later, they'll go back to them. It's like they're in an abusive relationship. And I think that's what a lot of this hopium stuff's about. It's like an abusive relationship. They give you something which isn't true. Then it's all taken away and you go back for more. So that's, in conclusion, is what I think about a lot of that stuff. But keep us updated with your situation, Martin, and let us know what Tesco's have to say.
Yes.
Maybe in a week or so.
Yeah, but well, our lockdown ends on the 1st of February here anyway, so I hope all this will be swept under the carpet. I'm sure they'll be wanting to not have it rear its ugly head.
I think you ought to recruit a mask army.
Yes, I think we need. Everyone needs to follow the lead of Switzerland. What Switzerland are doing is they are pitching for a referendum on whether or not the government should ever have the power to call another lockdown, because it is not the right solution. One of the things the Isle of Man government has been doing as part of its sort of information campaign about COVID is they've had this graph on the government website, which is the 3 bell curves, the curves that Boris said you've got to flatten. The do nothing curve, which is horrifically steep and means lots and lots of people would have died. The middle curve is what they expected that people would comply to the lockdown, and a much shallower bell curve, which was the perfection. If everyone did everything, if everyone did perfect social distancing, the trouble is with this graph is by mid-April, reality, which they were plotting against it, dropped right to the floor and wasn't even following the perfection curve from the modelling. Surely, if this wasn't a post-truth world, that would have said that the modelling on which the lockdowns were rolled out was complete garbage. So no one should be even thinking about rolling out a lockdown at all anywhere in the world.
Well, I think even the World Health Organization said that wasn't a good idea. But the point is, once you've got things in motion
under
and
control,
you're going to destroy the economy, you have to keep them indoors and away from each other. It's very obvious. It's not even that complicated, is it? I mean, you isolate the population from themselves and each other.
The thing is, it's like riding a tiger. When do you get off? Because the tiger's just going to get angrier and angrier and angrier. You just got to keep trying to ride it. And this is what the problem the politicians now have. They can't. There isn't an exit strategy from this that doesn't involve them getting lynched, I think.
Well, they've been exposed like never before.
Yeah.
I've never seen them been exposed like they are now. I mean, there is so much coming out on them.
That's very true, but these are just useful idiots and they'll be replaced. Boris Johnson doesn't run the country. Matt Hancock is just given a set of sound bites to say, and he's a careerist, so he does it. These people have either been bought off as lobbyists or they've been bought off as lobbyists and mentored. So there are no consequence to what's going on. Governments are no longer important to these people who are at Davos, because the infrastructure for sustainable development is in place. That is global governance. Global governance is unstructured in the eyes of the public. The people who know a bit will say there's a new world order, but 97% of the population will say that's a conspiracy theory, and they will drown out the 3% who say new world order. But there's no new world order. There is a global governance system, which is unstructured, which goes through all of these stakeholder corporations that the World Economic Forum are talking about. They're talking about what they're doing. It's just the public don't know the language because they're living in a post-truth world, and they think that the COVID action plan is about a virus when it's got nothing to do with it. But if you say that to people, they'll go, that's insane.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's a crazy world. And it's a world that's that they are deliberately destroying. So why?
Well,
it just makes no sense at all. We're
just in it, Martin. I mean, the thing is, at Davos, what we've seen around the world, we are seeing a little bit of chaos, a little bit of resistance, but things are generally going in the right direction. Most of the major stakeholders in the world are on board. You are in the minority. And we have people in your local area to drown out what you're saying. Even our useful idiot at Tesco's is making you an example of locally, Martin. So our global governance structure knows no bounds. It's limitless. It's everywhere. And why not join us? No one's going to be left behind.
Well, I heard a couple of interesting things this week. I don't know. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that one of the Rothschilds died at age 57 of a heart attack. And a second Rothschild jumped naked from the top of an apartment building with her baby.
I've not heard that one. I heard
didn't know that. There are a lot of them, though. They did undertake their breeding program from the 1800s onwards. So there are a lot of little known ones. Yes. So in conclusion, I would say there's some great order out of Davos. I like that. Someone's put order out of Davos. Very good. Some very good stuff in there tonight, actually. So thanks to everyone who's joined in tonight. I'm a little low on energy this evening, so it's been a bit laid back. We'll be back next week, 9:30 p.m. I'll do the Spreaker show. Then I'll do the same thing here at 10 o'clock. I think these seem to be quite popular. We've got a lot of stuff to get into. I've got a huge backlog of stuff that I want to bring up, all COVID related. So thanks to Jerry.
It's dominating our lives now. All the other world problems just seem to have been put on the back burner, don't they?
Well, you can only have one thing at a time. In a global governance structure, you need one thing to concentrate on at a time. Otherwise, you will never achieve anything, Martin. We're concentrating on COVID now. Once COVID's over, well, actually, COVID will never be over. It's always going to be there. A little bit like climate change is always going to be there.
Well,
These things are never going to go.
Over here, just recently, as soon as the election was won, all of a sudden, here comes out all this mainstream media stuff. Oh, we have to put the middle class back to work to get again. After they've all gone out of business. So they do that, and then they're going, oh, well, the COVID cases are dropping drastically, shortly after Biden gets in. So the whole thing you could see is just totally manipulated.
Yeah, which it shows so clearly that the whole thing was just manipulated.
Oh yeah.
And Gretchen Whitmer is saying she's going to open up restaurants now.
Yeah, she's a lunatic if I ever saw one. But it's like they do this thing. They do this, like, who was it? Goebbels or one of those guys said, if you put out a big enough lie, people will believe it.
Yeah.
And it's like this is horrendous. This is just horrendous.
Yeah.
That is very true, and that's probably the conclusive statement. If it's a big enough lie, people will believe it. The lie has to be bold, it has to be audacious, and it has to be absolutely, unbelievably untrue, and people believe it.
Yeah, exactly. Look at this.
I mean, I've been putting out news for years, all factual stuff, and the people who put out the rubbish get hundreds of thousands of views because people don't want to hear the truth. There's very few want to actually hear truth about things. So we are in the post-truth world, but I think the people who listen to this show are not in the post-truth world, which is great. Well, I'd like to think they're not anyway.
Yeah,
all right.
It's amazing how they do this horrendous thing, and then they go, okay, it's done, move on. Yes. We cheated, we won, move on. It's done. Yeah. It's over. Forget it.
No one wants to actually stand trial for their crimes, do they?
Yeah, and they can sweep it all under the rug now with Biden in there, man. All that evidence, man, it disappear. Watch it.
If this was a Greek tragedy, yeah. If it was a Greek tragedy, they'd have to play it out in front of an audience, but they don't want to do that. Not even when they inaugurated Biden. Audience, no. Well, we haven't got one anyway, but make sure there's not one there.
Have people seen the video of that, of the swearing in, where from one angle there's two women in white behind Biden, and when the camera cuts the other angle, supposedly while he's being sworn in, those women are not there.
Oh, yeah, it was done in a studio. Matter of fact, they had the National Guard. They were so afraid that one of the National Guard would shoot Biden that they ordered that all the ammunition be taken from them. And if you look at the pictures of the soldiers walking around in the proximity of Biden, all their magazines and their guns, there are none. So they took he was so afraid that Nancy Pelosi or Biden would get shot by one of the soldiers. They had to have the ammunition removed, and then they asked the FBI to do a background check on all the National Guard to see which way they voted. So they were actually investigating them. So that's how scared they are.
Trusting of your armed forces, isn't it?
Oh, they don't trust them at all.
Well,
Pelosi,
the difference
Pelosi went to the Marines.
Yeah.
She went to the Marine general, and she ordered him to provide Marines to protect her and Biden. And he basically told her to go screw herself. You know, he didn't respond to her commands. He responds to the commands of the president. So that shows you how fearful they are. They're scared to death.
Well, it's interesting because you can control the narrative, but you can't control real public opinion, and which is why they're doing what they're doing with the media. That's why it's the post-truth world. So that is the interesting thing as to what's going to happen underneath it all, because over the next few weeks, that's going to become more and more apparent, because what's just happened in America is the most obvious coup, I think, that's ever been. I mean, usually when they stage a coup, they make it look like a coup's happened, right? But it's got to be the most half-hearted one in history, hasn't it?
And I'm sitting here going, where is the military? You know, the Treason Act has been signed. He has all the responsibility or all the power to do that. What happened to the military? You know, why are they sitting there and letting the country be in? They know as much as we do, if not more. Why are they allowing the country to be taken over by the communists? They know.
Well, it's a global action plan. I mean, it's a new system called communitarianism. So they don't use the word communism much anymore, but it is communism in the respect that it adheres to most of the principles of communism. It's a new totalitarian system, which is run on the idea that we're all one big global community.
Well, they completely trashed
the idea.
They completely trashed the U.S. Constitution. I mean, they broke it like 20, 25 times, clearly. And it's like, oh, don't look in that direction. Forget that. There is no rule of law over here anymore. I mean, the legal system is totally corrupt. I don't know. I've never seen anything like this. In my entire life, I've never seen anything like this.
No, it's quite amazing.
It is.
Did you see the official White House YouTube channel has taken down the swearing-in ceremony video because it had so many dislikes?
I saw that. That was amazing, because what they were saying,
dislike figures down, and people catching them out doing that by having time-stamped pictures of the counts, and then a time-stamped picture of the count being way lower, like tens of thousands lower, a couple of hours later. And eventually they realised that this would be so embarrassing being caught doing this that they've just taken the video down now. You can't see it. You can't watch the official White House YouTube channel's video of the wonderful historic moment of the president being sworn in. You just can't see it. They're so
well. This is the point. They manipulated all the YouTube likes and dislikes, because people were going, they've reversed the likes and dislikes, you know. I mean, but that's I think my main point is, how can you do that? You can control the kind of media narrative of public opinion, but you can't really control public opinion, and that is why it's so interesting. There's something very interesting going on. I think we should sign off tonight at this point. Thanks to everyone in chat, and definitely see you again next week. Thanks, Jerry and Martin. And
you're welcome.
And Courtney
will be there. Yes, of course. Thanks, Courtney. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. See if we can sort out the technical problems next week.
Yes. And remember, windowsontheworld.net. Do have a look at the archive. There's tons of stuff in there, and lots of talks and information which actually lead up to the point that we're in at the moment. So it's a good reference library. That's the whole point of the website, is it's a reference library. And I go back into it sometimes and I find stuff that I'd forgotten about. In fact, somebody was telling me they were looking at a show from about 5 or 6 years ago, and there are people still looking at that archive. So there is a lot of stuff in there. And thanks for listening. See you all soon on Windows on the World. Thanks a lot, everyone, and good night.
Right.
Good night.
Good night.